Hey guys, Pastor Tanner here. 3 signs that you're a fundamentalist or you're talking with one. Now before we jump into the 3 signs, I just have a few preliminary words. First, according to the historical definition of the term, I am a fundamentalist. A fundamentalist used to just be somebody who adheres to the fundamentals of the faith. That would be me. However, in our current day and age, the term fundamentalist has taken on new shades and nuances of meaning. Nowadays, it means somebody who tenaciously holds to their position, believing they're always right and is not open to engaging with somebody else in dialogue. It's in this newer sense that I am using the term fundamentalist in this video. That said, I don't care much for semantics, so if you consider yourself a fundamentalist and want to use it in its older sense, be my guest. My attack doesn't apply to you. However, I also want to point out this. Fundamentalists come in many shapes and sizes. There are Christian Baptist fundamentalists. I've met Presbyterian fundamentalists. I've also met atheist fundamentalists and Jewish fundamentalists. I have a problem with fundamentalism across the board. I'm an equal opportunity hater when it comes to fundamentalism. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the 3 signs that you're a fundamentalist or you're talking with one. The first sign that you're dealing with a fundamentalist is that a disagreement with them is equivalent to a disagreement with God or with the Scriptures or with science or with whatever their authority is. You see, a fundamentalist fails to recognize that they are interpreting things through a grid or a framework. Instead, they think they are perceiving the facts and the evidence as they are on the surface without having any interpretive framework. But as James White has said, those who are blind to their traditions are a slave to their traditions. All of us bring an interpretive framework to the Scriptures, and we understand them in a certain way. A fundamentalist thinks that whatever they read in the Scriptures is actually self-evident on the text itself. So if you disagree with their interpretation, then you're disagreeing with the Bible. After all, they don't have an interpretation. They don't have a tradition. They're just telling you what the Scriptures say. And if they disagree with you, then bad for you. I encountered this particular error of fundamentalism when I was first engaging with a friend of mine. And we were talking about the issue of believers' baptism versus infant baptism. And I was noting the fact that while I believe in believers' baptism, that those who believe in infant baptism have good arguments for what they believe also. The individual said this, well, don't we just need to teach them what the Bible says? That is a perfect example of a fundamentalistic mindset. They think that the Bible self-evidently teaches the Baptist position, and if you disagree with them on the issue of baptism, you're simply disagreeing with the Bible. They fail to understand their interpretive framework or lens. They fail to understand how their tradition is causing them to read the Scriptures in a certain way. This is one aspect of fundamentalism. The second way you know you're dealing with a fundamentalist is that they fail to recognize nuance and tension within the text. Now don't get me wrong, I believe the Scriptures are clear, and we have good understandings from the Bible of how Christians are supposed to live their lives. However, somebody who is of a fundamentalistic mindset fails to recognize that the Scriptures give this clarity to us in a variety of ways. I'll give an example of this. I was preaching a sermon out of Ecclesiastes, and in that sermon, I said we are supposed to be obedient to governments and those who rule and are in authority. I cross-referenced at this point Romans 13. On their way out the door, somebody approached me and said, yeah, but don't the Scriptures say that we are to obey God rather than men? Why are you telling us to be obedient to governments and those in authority? And this is the failure of the fundamentalist. They can't reconcile 2 things that are in tension. The Bible both teaches that we are to be obedient to governments and those who are in authority, and that we are to obey God rather than men. The Christian endeavor is how to put these ideas together. The fundamentalist fails to do that, however. The Scriptures are black and white. They clearly teach we are to obey God rather than men, and so we're not going to be obedient to governments and those in authority. The third way that you know you're dealing with a fundamentalist is that they fail to distinguish between primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of doctrine. What do I mean by this? Well, in Christian understanding, we recognize that there are certain doctrines that are at the core of what we believe, God and the gospel. However, we also recognize that there are other doctrines that, while important, we may have disagreements on them. Eschatology, for example. Some may be pre-trib, post-trib, some may be amillennial, but we recognize that this is not a primary level of doctrine. A fundamentalist fails to differentiate between levels of doctrine. For them, all doctrines are primary. I was listening to one pastor and preacher, and he actually called out this issue of eschatology as a primary issue. He said, if people don't agree with our doctrine, they're heretics. And he followed up with this. He said, bunch of mid-trib, bunch of post-trib, bunch of false doctrine. That's what he said. Not only that, he said, I don't know if some of you Calvinists have crept up in here, but I want you to know that Calvinism is as false doctrine as ordaining a woman preacher is. You can see his point. Any disagreement with him on any point of doctrine is a disagreement with all of the doctrine. There are no such things as primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of doctrine. This is a fundamentalistic mindset. So there are my 3 ways you know you're talking with a fundamentalist or you're a fundamentalist yourself. The reason I'm doing this video is I think that fundamentalism of this sort is not good for Christianity in our current day and age. Now, when I say that, please don't hear me saying that I don't think doctrine and theology is important. It is absolutely essential. However, in an internet age, we need to be more conversant with other positions rather than less conversant. And the way we do this is through being open-minded and having good discussions. Instead, I would like to advance a position that I hold for myself. And this position I call open but uncompromised. Open but uncompromised tries to grab the tension between not caving to political pressures on the one hand, but also being open to recognize other people have different interpretations than me. I truly struggle with fundamentalists of all stripes, and I think the open but uncompromised position is the path forward for the church today in our internet age. So remember to hold to your positions in an open but uncompromised way.